it's Kimberly here. Thank you for coming to my channel. Well, today I'm going to talk about Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt, her business partner. They were both arrested on August 30th. And Ruby Franke, actually, I've heard her name being pronounced as Frank or Frankie, but it ends with an E, so I'm just going to say Frankie. And I've heard so many people using that pronunciation of her last name, so I'm just going to go by that. Well, Ruby Franke, if you don't know, she was the matriarch of a family channel, and people considered, I hear this all the time, that it was one of the most toxic family channels. I didn't really watch it that much. I watched it out of curiosity. I saw a lot of the clips after, hearing all these bad things about it, and I just wanted to see for myself. And yeah, some of the stuff I saw was, pretty, she was very strict with her child rearing ideas. And she seemed to be very narcissistic and just extremely controlling and trying to control their behavior constantly. And a lot of times, I think she came across, seemed to me, extremely narcissistic and being very, I want to say, kind of thoughtless to the child's feeling, like when she was explaining something or trying to show her authority over them. And I think that branded them more as one of the most toxic family channels on YouTube. And their channel is defunct now. YouTube has deleted it because of this controversy, what's going on. And also, her ex-husband, or actually I don't know if they're divorced. I'm not real sure. There's been some back and forth over whether they're actually divorced or not, but they are separated. They've been separated, I think, for at least a year. And he did have his wedding ring on, so I'm going to say that they're probably still married. I don't know if that was a show of support for the kid or for, what's happening with her or what. I don't know. But most likely I'm going to say that they're probably still married. And Ruby Franke was given no bail. She's being charged with 6 counts of felony child abuse. And that's a serious charge. No bail and 6 counts of child abuse. And the YouTube logo was taken off their bus, their SUV that said 8 passengers, and then it had the YouTube logo on it. So he had that removed. She's in jail being held still without any bail. She can't get out, and it won't be determined whether or not she can get out before they have another hearing. Maybe they'll give her bail, maybe not. Possibly she would get out, maybe not. If not, he's probably going to get custody. There's 4 children that are in protective custody now. The older child, Sherry Franke, who cut ties with her parents quite a while back, she called the police on her mother for leaving the children alone in the house alone. I think that was a couple of years ago, and 1 or 2 years ago maybe. And police had been called to that house probably about 5 or 6 times, and they were not able to get into the house. Nobody would answer the door. So I don't think that they didn't try to enter the house, break the door down, or do anything like that, because it wasn't reported as specific emergency. And sometimes leaving your children alone, if you're going to the store, if you're going somewhere, people do that. I mean, I was left alone all the time. I bet that was back in the old days when you could do that. But it was reported that she would leave for days at a time and leave these kids alone for days at a time. So that is kind of a safety concern, something like that. I would never leave my kids alone for days at a time. I remember we were left, me and my sisters were left. I was a teenager. We were all teenagers. But I think because we were older and my mom, I don't know, it was back in the time period when things were done that way. And nowadays, you really just can't do those things. And along with her business partner, they do a podcast. Ruby and Jodi, they have a podcast together. And Jodi Hildebrandt is the founder of Connections, which is a counseling type of service. I believe it's like family and child counseling and I don't really know specifically. I haven't got into the specifics of. I just kind of did an overview of it. And she has a license. She's a licensed counselor, which after being arrested for this, that might be taken from her also. Whenever you're a licensed counselor, if you're breaking the law, if something like that occurs, your license can be pulled from you. And these videos that were on the family channel of Ruby Franke, the way that she would interact with her children, one of the biggest things that she did was to withhold food as a form of punishment or as a reinforcement for her style of discipline, I guess you could say. And there's many videos of her doing that, telling the kids, you've got to do your chores. I'm not going to feed you until you do that. And just, that was an issue with her. And the reason that she was arrested was her 12-year-old son, Russell, escaped the house that he was living in, which was Jodi Hildebrandt's house. And also the mother and two other children, Ruby Franke, the mother, and two other children were living in the house, in Jodi Hildebrandt's house. And I believe that was for convenience, I guess, for where they do the podcast and just for business, the convenience of performing that business, the duties of that business. Because they do have, Ruby Franke, they have a large house, a really nice, beautiful, big house that her and her 6 kids and her husband lived in. But the husband, Kevin, has gone, I don't know, he went somewhere, I don't know, somewhere else, I don't remember. He's kind of been out of their life for a long time, or for quite a while, since they have separated. And he said he really didn't know what was going on with his kids. Now, I find that to be odd, that you're not, that's just, even if you've been separated from your family, you do need to keep in contact with your kids, and you need to know what is going on. And what was going on was the 12-year-old boy, Russell, escaped from the house, Jodi Hildebrandt's house, and ran to a neighbor's house and asked for the neighbor to call the police. And the neighbor called the police. He was very emotional. There's a description of what the boy looked like. He was emaciated. He had duct tape around his ankles and wrists and open wounds. And this caller got very, emotional, saying that the child, he almost couldn't get the words out, that the child had been detained. And the 911 operator was very compassionate. She took the information very, she just did a very good job in the way that she communicated with him. Because a lot of 911 operators, this frustrates me like crazy. A lot of times they repeat it after you, now what happened? And the way they have some sort of attitude, they want you to constantly repeat every little thing that you say, as if they can't hear you or something. And knowing that, full well that they did hear you the first time. And this operator was excellent with the way that she performed the duties of her job and got the information. She was very compassionate, and that type of call, the way she did it, went so much smoother, so much better, and she quickly got the police en route to the address, because the neighbor was worried about Jodi Hildebrandt coming and looking for the boy. He was a little concerned about that. They were sitting outside. He described they were sitting outside, I think, on their front step, or kind of a patio area on the front area of their house. And it's a nice neighborhood, nice area that they were in. And the boy was speaking. You could barely hear him in the background. And I did put in a request for a 911 call, or from the Freedom of Information Act, to get the 911 call. I've never done that before. I filled out the information. It's not a hard, you have to fill out a few things, pages, I guess you could say. And I had made a mistake on the date, so I went back to the next page. I went to go fill it out, I corrected that, and then I tried to go forward into the other pages. And then I submitted it. I was checking it, submitted it, but I missed one thing. And I missed a question that said, is this a request for information? And it has a simple little yes or no. And I did not check the yes box. So I probably won't get that request. And I think they have to answer you within 10 days. So I'm probably going to be denied. But I was trying to get that so I could play the 911 tape. I mean, you can hear it on so many, there's, channels everywhere that are playing that tape. But I'm pretty sure I'm not going to get it because I think you have to be pretty accurate on stuff like that. And that was a very important question, and I missed it. It was a little tiny question at the very bottom because the other parts had, you had to type in a bunch of information. And I just didn't click that little box, so that. 4 of her kids are in protective custody, as I said earlier. And there were 2 siblings that were also living at the house, a 10-year-old and I think a 14-year-old. And there was a possibility that one of those children were also injured. There was a police report that was filed, and both the children were taken to the hospital. All 3 of the 12-year-old, the 10-year-old, 14-year-old, all 3 were taken to the hospital to be checked out. The other 2, I believe, were not, one of them was not injured. One, I'm not sure which one it was. If it was a 10 or 14-year-old, may have had not as severe injuries as the 12-year-old. But all in all, that whole situation is, just completely disturbing. She runs a family channel, and no longer. And she was doing a podcast on raising your children, and then she, the secrets come out and things come out. Well, actually, it wasn't quite that much of a secret because a lot of people had called repeatedly to have the police do wellness checks or try to check on these children, but nothing was really solidly, no lead or anything really led to an investigation, I guess you could say. Each time the police were denied entry or did not get really no information. And now there was some things on Ruby's channel that she recorded, recording herself talking about withholding food and things like that would probably be used in court as evidence against her, videos detailing stuff like that. There was also a video of the oldest boy talking about where his bed had been taken away for about 7 or 8 months, and he was sitting there with his mother, with Ruby, and he started talking about, and she said something to the effect that, well, we hadn't said anything about that on this channel, but since you brought it up, so that was kind of like a secret behind the scenes that they weren't going to tell, I guess, but he brought it out. And I believe he was the one, he was also sent off to a wilderness camp, and it was like a very primitive wilderness camp. It was way out, and they had to use a lot of resources to, to somewhat survive. I'm sure they were given food and stuff, basic necessities, but those kind of wilderness camps I can't stand. A lot of children have perished in those conditions. You don't know these people, you don't know their behavior, they're off in the middle of nowhere. These children have nowhere to turn if they're being abused. And this also reminds me of Paris Hilton. She was sent to these types of behavior programs, and she was molested. She was saying that she was essayed, and that it was being done under the guise that it was a medical exam, which I don't understand how those people are not in jail now. You cannot do that. That is just outrageous. And I would never think of sending my kid to, I don't have kids, but if I did, I would never send my kids off to some place like that with people I don't know. You don't know how people are. You just don't know. Even if your child is, you're at your last point. I think those camps are extremely dangerous. There's numerous children that have died and been essayed and been tortured and have worse problems now because of going to places like that. And I've read horror stories, articles, and things like that about some of these incidents, and I just would never do that. And one day, the youngest girl, Eve, I believe she's like 5 years old. She was in pre-K or some pre-K type of school, very young, and she was supposed to make her own lunch and get herself ready and do everything for herself to go, to school. And well, she forgot her lunch, and Ruby said that the school called her and she said, well, she's not going to bring her anything, and she hoped that nobody else would give her food to teach her child a lesson. And a child that young, their brain isn't fully formed. They're not going to remember every little thing. They're trying to get they're lucky if they get the right color socks on, two color same socks, and not feeding a child like that all day long at school. I mean, it makes it hard for them to concentrate. That's just horrible. I think that was absolutely horrible. And then there was one time in one of the videos where Ruby Frankie threatened to cut the head off of one of the children's, I think it's like a doll or stuffed toy or something like that. And the look on that child's face was just, it was heartbreaking. And, I remember having like this it was like a beanbag doll thing till I was like 7 or 8 years old. And I dragged that thing around with me everywhere. It was really small. I could hold it. And it was like a thing of like comfort. It soothed me, and it was kind of squishy. And, it was something that I think a lot of people, it was something tactile that you could hold on to. A lot of stuffed toys. That's why police, a lot of times they carry stuffed toys in the back of their cruisers to give children, assault, or children that are being, if they're watching their parents be arrested or something like that. These calls where there's children there, and if children happen to be there, they give them a toy to soothe them and to comfort them. And I thought that was really cruel. It was like inflicting some kind of psychological pain on that little girl. I really don't think it was a good way to teach her a lesson or to teach her something, discipline. There's different ways to discipline your child. And the oldest girl, Sherry Frankie, she has completely cut off any contact with her parents. Actually, I don't know if she's in contact with her dad, but I do remember hearing that she completely cut off contact with her mother, definitely. And she has tried herself many times to get some kind of support, that these kids that are still left in the home are, being treated, in a very damaging way. And I believe that I'm not sure if it was on Twitter or if one of her social media posts was like, finally something has been done. And so this is really sad and really horrible. And these children have, really suffered a lot. And hopefully she'll get what's coming to her. That she seemed to be upset in the hearing. The look on her face was like of defiance and kind of like angry like. I noticed the look on her face, and I think she was like in disgust that she had been just disgusted with the whole process, that she's been arrested for this, that she's not abusing her kids, and that like in her brain, I think that she believes that, the way she's treated and raised her kids is perfectly acceptable. And that was the look in her eye that I got when I saw it. But, okay. Well, I'll see if that 911 call comes in. It probably won't. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be denied. But, okay. Thank you all. Y'all have a good day. And I'll make another video soon. Thank you.